by stating that we do not have a quorum. So from a technical standpoint, we will not be conducting a formal public meeting. However, in the interest of fairness to our petitioner who's shown up for a workshop this evening, we're going to continue on with a discussion. There will not be any business conducted. We won't be making any decisions or doing any voting on that point. So I would, however, we will call to order this collection of folks here. It's not technically a meeting. And what the heck, I'm going to say we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance anyway. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. With that, we have, I'm going to track through our agenda here. We have no need to call roll because we know we don't have a quorum. And we'll dispense with communications formalities here. Next item on there is approval of minutes. Because we don't have a quorum, we cannot do that, so we're going to skip right past it. Item number 1 for this evening is a public hearing, which has already been re-noticed for the December, is that correct?
No, so we haven't re-noticed for it yet. We will send out new notices when it does come back
on. Are we within the window?
Right now they're anticipating possibly January 3rd. So they've gotten some feedback on their incentive stuff. And then they're just, they have said they still kind of want to go forward with their entitlements and the development approvals. So likely January 3rd, and we'll have to re-notice for that.
Okay, sounds good. So for the Bremen Station project, which is a public hearing scheduled for this evening, it will not take place tonight and will not be taking place on the 20th of December. It looks like it will most likely be re-noticed for the 3rd of January, at least as far as we know right now.
Correct.
Stay tuned. Moving right along to the item on the agenda for this evening is a workshop for Jimmy John's, 7228 West 191st Street. Blake Purnell on behalf of C82 Commercial LLC, a special use permit for a substantial deviation from the Brookside Marketplace planned unit development. So again, we will have a workshop this evening. We'll go into some detail. Have some discussion, but we will not be making any decisions this evening. We weren't planning to anyway, but from a formal perspective, we will likely have combined the workshop for this, abbreviated with the public hearing. Is that one already noticed?
Yes. Yeah, so that'll be December 20th.
December 20th.
Yes,
okay.
That'll be our formal workshop and public hearing. As long as you're okay with that, we can combine them formally together there.
Yep, that sounds good to me. Okay, if there are no questions or comments from the rest of the commission, we can kind of move forward with the staff report on this item.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll just give you guys a summary, even though it's not a workshop. I can point out some of the open items we have, and I think the petitioners had our staff report as well, and we can see if they're on board with kind of our open items and recommendations, and then go to that next meeting. So this is Jimmy John's commercial building or Jimmy John's retail building. This request is going to be for a substantial deviation of the Brookside Marketplace planned unit development, and then site plan approval. This is for a 940 square foot building addition, facade changes, and then it'll permit a third drive-through in the Brookside Marketplace shopping center in that PUD. So the proposed substantial deviation in the site plan is going to allow that Bank of America building to be expanded and converted to a multi-tenant building. The one kind of known anticipated use now is a Jimmy John's with a drive-through, and then there'll be an additional retail space there as well. I know we had some technical difficulties too, so I'm not sure if you guys can see these on your screen, but I think some are in the staff report too. Just kind of give you a general overview of what the building is going to look like, and then the improvements, they're kind of the layout and look they're going for. So for the existing site, again, it's located in the Brookside Marketplace Shopping Center. So this is the large shopping center. It's in Will County on the south side of I-80. Most people know it by Target. There's also Best Buy, Dick's, Kohl's, some of the bigger tenants that are in there. There's a lot of kind of smaller retail outlet buildings, as well as some other inline tenants that are out there as well. Most of the Brookside Glen Shopping Center was built from 2004 to 2010. The most recent buildings that were built out there were Panera Bread, which has a standalone restaurant with an ancillary drive-through on it. And then the Pier 1 Imports building, it was built in 2015 too. Same year as Panera Bread. That's kind of a multi-tenant retail building with Pier 1 Imports in it. The bank site was the site was originally designed for Bank of America, who occupied it from 2006 when it was completed to 2015. Since 2015 and now, it's been vacant. The bank site was designed with some intention in mind that it could be converted to a restaurant or some other commercial use. Primarily just it increased number of parking spaces compared to what a bank would typically require, as well as a trash enclosure when they didn't really need one at the time, but in the vision of being able to convert this, as well as the architecture, that this could be converted to some other use, kind of knowing that banks kind of come and go. A lot of it's going online, so we kind of had a feeling that there's a good chance that banks, we at least wanted this building to have some other commercial use other than a bank in the future. So here on this PowerPoint's another picture of just kind of the existing site when it was used as the Bank of America. Original architecture. The zoning on the site is B3 PD. Again, general business and commercial. It's the Brookside Marketplace PUD. The property is also in the Urban Design Overlay District, so this is our kind of extra set of standards that we have for some of our newer developments in terms of making them kind of pedestrian and bike friendly. It usually means pulling up the building, sidewalks, bike paths, bike racks, that kind of thing. There are a little bit different standards for it in that overlay district for kind of large scale commercial developments like this, where there's kind of big box or national retailers. That still allows it to be a shopping center, but hopefully promotes pedestrian connection and biking. Some of that is incorporated in the shopping center, some not so much. Some of it has sidewalks through there, but they kind of end at a certain point and don't really connect very well. So the land surrounding Brookside Marketplace is primarily undeveloped land. So to the west is zoned ORI, to the west of Brookside Marketplace. That's the old Greystone Golf Course, and that's zoned office and restricted industrial. To the south is a mix of unincorporated land, R1 zoning and B3 zoning. Just kind of a mix right now. It's likely to be developed all together, and the vision is that most of that's going to be B3 commercial as well. And then to the east is B3 and commercial, and also vacant land kind of over by the Odyssey Fun World. So most of this land's kind of envisioned as a commercial office entertainment type area. that kind of connects to the amphitheater and gives some good shopping, dining, entertainment options. The PUD, so there has been changes in the shopping center, different additions over the years. Most of it has kept with kind of that original vision of the shopping center was high quality design, brick, masonry, natural kind of prairie tones. That's kind of the use or the look they were going for. And then they wanted to make it pretty heavily focused on retail, with there then being kind of your sit-down restaurants with a limit to kind of how many fast food restaurants there could be. Wanting a kind of higher quality shopping center and maybe not as many, again, drive-through restaurants where you have a line of all of them. So it did limit the number of drive-through restaurants to 2, and then only allowed that number to move up if there was more than 3 sit-down restaurants in the shopping center. So right now, they have that maximum of 2 drive-through restaurants. That's the Arby's and the Taco Bell. And then for the standalone restaurants, they have 3, which is TGI Fridays, Hot and Juicy Crab, which I'm not quite sure if they're open yet, but if not, it will be soon. And that's the Old Boston's Pizza next to TGI Fridays. And then there's Panera Bread, which they do have a ancillary drive-through they were allowed to have in the PUD. But since it's a standalone building and the majority of their business is dine-in, they meet that standalone restaurant. So they are at the max of their drive-through limit of 2. So this is a request in here for a substantial deviation. Again, this is any type of significant change to a planned unit development, whatever the plan stands as. So this is mainly due to the building addition, the facade changes to the building, and then that 3rd drive-through restaurant they're adding where it limits it to 2. So they're proposing 940 square foot addition to the existing 4,600 square foot building that's there. The addition's facade's kind of going to blend in with the existing facade of the bank. In terms of the material, the color, it'll look like they continue basically the one side. The front facade is planning on having awnings kind of differentiate the 2 tenant spaces that'll be there, and then give it a little bit more of a commercial look and take away the little bit of a bank look it still has. And again, there's the 3rd drive-through. It's not anticipated that this is really going to change kind of the feel of that shopping center. It'll be a sandwich shop with I'll get into the drive-through numbers a little bit more later, but it's a relatively low-use drive-through, so not quite the same as Arby's, Taco Bell, McDonald's. So the proposed use, again, Jimmy John's, it's a sandwich shop, and they'll have the drive-through. The remaining 3,900 square feet of this space is expected to be a single tenant. They've kind of got that envisioned right now as kind of a small group or personal fitness center, but they don't have anyone locked in there at the moment. So it could be kind of anything under that B3 zoning, typically like a retail or personal service type use. The owner has stated that there is no plan for outdoor seating on this site right now. So we do have an open item for that just, we'd like to add a condition to any approvals that if they do plan to do outdoor seating, they have to get a permit and approvals. We just want to kind of clarify that, since most restaurants that come into these tend to say we don't want it, and then once they open and get settled, they tend to put furniture out. And we just want to make sure they're still in compliance with the ADA code, or walkway codes, things like that, and that it's safe for people to dine out there. And I did forget the one other open item is just our general discussion of that substantial deviation in general is, do those changes meet kind of the intent of what that PUD and what the goals of that PUD are? So we always kind of generally discuss those. Here's that layout with Jimmy John's being the smaller space on the left. And then the kind of unknown retail space at this point on the right, 3,900 square feet. So the site plan, there's some missing dimensions on this in terms of kind of the drive aisle widths. But the goal of some of the changes on this site are to create some better traffic flow on the site. Since they're putting in the drive-through, it does kind of change the flow of traffic through here. And if you kind of left it as it is, there'd be some awkward kind of points where vehicles might cross, or you have stacking and a vehicle's got to go on the other side of the stacking lane. So these changes were made with the petitioner just to kind of make that traffic flow better. They have proposed converting the two entrances to the west, or it's on the top of the site plan that's on the screen, to one-way entrances. We've recommended that they keep the one on the northwest, furthest to the north site, that they keep, it's in a red circle, either on the PowerPoint or on your guys' staff reports, that they keep that two-way, just to allow, there's existing parking spaces in the back. It would allow them to kind of back out and exit right away. It would also allow, if someone turns in there accidentally, they can kind of just exit right away instead of looping around the entire building. They have also proposed to keep the drive aisle to the south of the building one way, so that'll prevent people kind of coming from the main parking aisle and exiting through that. Open item wise, we do have that. We do need some dimensions on the site plan. One-way drive aisles typically should be between 15 and 18 feet, and then two-way being 26 feet in width. So we do need some just additional dimensions of those entrances to make sure they comply with our parking lot and site codes. Then also the recommendation that entrance be kept as two-way traffic, but then allow them to convert the entrance off the main ring road to one-way, just to avoid, again, some crisscross traffic there from the stacking from the drive-through lane. Our last recommendation is got to do with that south side drive aisle they're converting to one-way. And just helping to avoid confusion or someone going down that drive aisle one way. Since it's a little over 26 feet, it kind of feels like it'll be a two-way drive aisle. And it is right now. So they're converting a two-way drive aisle to one-way. So to kind of stop that confusion, we've recommended that they add a second do not enter sign. They proposed one, but a second one will kind of help reinforce anyone going that way, as well as another sign at the end of the drive aisle that basically points out that there's no exit that way. So there'll be only one way to exit out of the parking lot in the front. And then we do at least want there to be some consideration or discussion as to could they reduce that drive aisle to that typical 15 to 18 feet instead of it being 26. That would kind of help any cars from going the wrong way down that aisle as well. There is some cost to that, obviously, though, and then some planning in terms of where you'd put the curb and what the widths would be. So that would take a little more planning and cost, but we at least want there to be some discussion on that at some point. So in terms of the drive-through lane, one concern we have is that this being converted to like a multi-tenant building, that there may be a future tenant that decides to not use that drive-through lane. So just to avoid an awkward architecture, awkward layout, awkward site circulation, we'd like to see there be a condition that if that isn't utilized by a future tenant, if the drive-through is not utilized, that they do have to remove that. We wouldn't do, if it was a vacant space, we're not going to make them remove it right away, but if a tenant's going in there, let's say a salon or something like that, that's not going to utilize that, they'd have to remove it at that time. And I can get into a little bit more of the parking and car stacking, but just in general, the use of that drive-through needs to remain. Yeah, I was going to say, if you guys have questions, go ahead.
Well, I was trying to decide whether to hold them to the end. You know what, I'll hold it till you get through the whole report.
Okay. Yeah, so the goal of that's just to avoid a situation where you have this empty, kind of shielded, unused area. And then it would require site plan approval. It may or may not come back before you guys. If they met all their plans and the site circulation worked, they may be able to do it administratively, but there would be some level of site plan approval that are required for when they take the drive-through down and the canopy off to make sure it meets all our codes. For the parking, so the petitioner did complete parking and drive-through analysis on this property, knowing that there could be some concerns converting a bank to a retail space. So they did submit an analysis from Kimley Horn, which is a professional engineering company. They're pretty well versed in this. They're kind of one of the big two you'll see around here doing parking analysis. So they did do this. They did some counts of kind of similar Jimmy John's locations in the area. I believe they chose them based on the size of the locations being comparable to this one, being located on multi-tenant properties, and then having a drive-through lane. So those were in Wheaton, Bolingbrook, and Plainfield, doing parking and drive-through counts there. So they did the counts kind of during their highest peak hours that they know are their peak hours just due to sales numbers, which is 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. During kind of weekday lunch hours is their peak. So the average parking demand was 12 spaces at these locations, and that included customers, employees, drive-through vehicles, so kind of the whole Jimmy John's usage there. So that was kind of the peak max, or the average maximum, with the absolute highest count ever being 13. So the remaining retail space for the parking analysis, just because there wasn't a specific use identified there yet, they kind of just used our generic retail and personal service establishments. So through this analysis, it kind of comes to the conclusion that they'll have enough parking on this site, and then it'll meet the village zoning code minimum parking requirements. It's kind of right up to the numbers for 37 spaces. So they have 37 spaces on the site. The parking analysis basically says they'll need 37 spaces. Typically, I would have some concerns with that being that close. However, there is a shared parking agreement over this property in the majority of the shopping center. So when they planned this, for the most part, they kind of knew that there's some ability that, tenants are going to come and go. Some spaces may use more parking, some may not. But in order to avoid there's a lot of parking out there already, so just to avoid even more expanses of parking lot, that they do some level of cross parking across all these properties, just so if someone parks in Arby's and goes to Taco Bell, or parks at Target and goes to Michael's or something like that, it's just someone's car can't be towed in there as well. So we haven't had any known issues with it or anything. I think it's pretty clear out there that most of that parking is just kind of shared throughout. So we feel like if there is any major peak demand over that 37 spaces, that it'll be pretty well accommodated in the shopping center, just parking field in general, be absorbed nearby, or people can park over in the Target parking lot and walk over. Doesn't seem likely that it'll hit that, but if it is, there's always some flexibility there. There's also the point that Jimmy John's is likely to have probably, at least with the fitness idea that they have, or with many other kind of retail and commercial uses, it'll likely have opposite hours for that space, since not many businesses have their peak time as 11 to 1 on weekdays. Since most people are working, but that's Jimmy John's, big time is lunch. So also said the 3 parking spaces in the back won't be necessarily designated for Jimmy John's parking, but they're highly likely to be used by the drive-through drivers. Just knowing how Jimmy John's generally works, is they have their delivery drivers with kind of cars they want near the door, so their drivers would be able to leave out the back door, jump in their car and go. So there's kind of those 3 spaces that really aren't great for customers, but they actually do kind of function here well for Jimmy John's. That analysis also took into account the drive-through lane, since this site really wasn't designed with a drive. It had bank drive-through lanes, but there's a lot less demand for a bank ATM or a teller machine than there is for food or coffee or whatever's going through a typical drive-through lane. So they did do some analysis here. The stacking on this site can accommodate up to kind of 8 average size vehicles if you take into account the average size, average spacing between them. Based on the counts at those nearby locations, the maximum that was ever out there was 6, with the typical being around 2 to 3 that were stacked, and again, the maximum 6. This is lower than most drive-through or most fast food restaurants, but as Kimley Horn and Jimmy John's kind of presented in this, is that they do have a little bit of a different food model. They have a pretty limited menu, a pretty quick service, even on the drive-through, because they only have 20 sandwiches they make, and most of them use the same ingredients. So they also have a lower overall kind of drive-through demand than a McDonald's would at lunch. So we do have concerns, though. It seems like this works. Looking at that Kimley Horn analysis, it looks like it makes some decent assumptions there and counts. We do have concerns, though, of any future tenants in this site. Pretty simply, Dunkin' Donuts isn't going to work on this site. You'd have cars backed up to the ring road, blocking traffic circulation in the overall shopping center, or McDonald's or someone else really isn't going to work on this site. So we do have some concerns with that. So just to alleviate that, we want to have a condition that says, any future tenant that wants to use this needs to show us it works, needs to show us they have the ability for stacking to handle both parking and the stacking of the drive-through. So we just want that condition. That just says prior approval, and a traffic analysis is required. If they don't end up using it, we also, again, want that condition that would say, if they can't utilize the drive-through, or they don't in the future, they take out the drive-through lane, kind of switch this probably back to 2-way circulation, or they maybe could put in parking or something else there through the site plan approval. Landscaping, so they're still maintaining the original landscaping from 2006. I believe that was in your packets. Anything that's missing or dead, we're going to kind of do a walk through the site, and anything that's missing or dead will be replaced. They're also expanding it where the end islands are expanding in the parking lot. That'll have additional landscaping, and then they're beefing up a little bit on the west side of the building. where the building has a little bit of an odd setup compared to most of the buildings in there. They face the shopping center. This is the only building that really faces Harlem Avenue, even though it doesn't have access from Harlem. So the front of this, in terms of being in the shopping center, actually is kind of the back of the house of the building. So in terms of landscaping, they've kind of beefed that up a little bit back there to give it a little bit more appeal. They'll be putting signage on there too, so it'll still draw people in to the site, but they want to add a little bit more landscaping back there, make sure they cover up any mechanical equipment. That'll all be screened. Just give it a little bit more of a commercial appearance. The sidewalks being expanded, so right now the kind of internal sidewalk that I was talking about that goes through about half of the shopping center stops at the Taco Bell property line between this property and the Taco Bell property. There's even a curb cut that's out there, so at one point it was designed that the sidewalk would go. I don't know if it was missed or just forgotten at some point, but the sidewalk just kind of abruptly ends right now at that property line, so it's only a small addition, but they're going to continue the sidewalk at least to the drive-through lane. It doesn't really connect to any other sidewalks, but at least it'll end at a paved surface, so you don't kind of have that trip hazard that's out there now. If you were in a wheelchair or something else, you could get somewhere and not have to go through grass. So not the best solution in terms of the grand vision of the shopping center, I guess, but this is one little step where at least this could connect to something in the future. Lighting on the site's going to remain again to the 2006 plan. They're not planning on changing that or any of the light fixtures on the site. Architecture-wise, so again, this is just going to continue the same material, same colors as existed on the bank previously. So they're just continuing that, and then putting some canopies, give it that commercial look, and then differentiate the two commercial spaces. So it'll be, I believe it's 75% brick for the 75% brick, and the rest of it's glazing. So they meet all the material requirements of the PUD and of our typical zoning and building codes. Signage, so they'll have signage on the front, signage on the sides, and signage on the back. The back being the part that orients itself towards the ring road and the shopping center. They also have the menu board signage, as well as some directional signage shown on their site plans. The dimensions of all that signage wasn't really shown on here. I kind of scaled out the wall signs. They look like they'll meet the code requirements for signage sizes and their locations, but we are asking that they add some additional dimensions, give us the dimensions of the directional signage, the ground sign, the wall signs, and then menu board sign on the site, just so we can verify those do meet the requirements. If they don't, this could still proceed. They'll just have to meet the PUD requirements. The one bigger question is kind of the ground sign, since the only thing out there right now is really just a foundation and conduit for the electric. So there's really no box, no brick, nothing out there. And that will require a brick base that matches the building. So we do kind of want to see what that proposed signage will look like. It'll probably incorporate both Jimmy John's and whatever the future tenant is in the other space. And then the directional signage is kind of needed again because this doesn't face that internal ring road. They're at least proposing a couple places where there's decision points to get in line for the drive-through to kind of direct people there, and especially at the entrance, kind of to let people know that's one way in the entrance you want to go to get in the drive-through lane. So Overall, this is, it's kind of unique. It's probably not the exact way this would be set up if this was a brand-new building or a new setup. But again, this is kind of an adaptive reuse of a bank that had drive-through lanes for an ATM, but now trying to put in a restaurant, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it seems like we've come to some workable solution here, just with a few open items. So this is likely to be a lot more commercially productive as well compared to a bank. Not that I have anything against banks, but there's a lot of them in the world, and a restaurant and commercial uses that likely produce a little bit more sales tax and services and restaurants and retail. I think this could be a good addition to that Brookside Marketplace Center, at least over what a bank can kind of provide for it. So that's my overview. So if you guys have any questions or maybe you want to have a little discussion
All right.
on those open items, if you want to maybe do a little presentation too.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, it's Emily.
Yes,
Hi,
Emily.
Emily. Thanks for coming, and especially, this is not an official meeting here, but anything you'd like to piggyback on top of what Dan had to say here?
Yes, I would. My name's Emily. I work for Oculus. We're the architects for C82 Commercial. Blake Purnell is the gentleman who purchased this abandoned building, and he had hired us to repurpose it. So one of the plans, I sincerely appreciate the Plan Commission staff report, the comments and insight and consideration. I plan on going back to the office and picking up some of these comments in regards to like the building signage. I'm going to have to work with Jimmy John's to get a little bit more information because I can draw things, but I don't know if that's going to work with them. So we'll have to get that all worked and figured out before the next meeting on the 20th. In regards to the multiple items, open items, I agree with a lot of these. And again, I think on our side, the only one that's going to require a little bit of back and forth is item number 7. So that's my first course of action when I get back to the office. I can't speak for Blake, but
I think we had I apologize for interrupting. I think we had some numbering.
Yeah, there's a typo between 7 and 8.
I just want to make sure we're clear on when you say number 7, which item are you referring to?
7, provide updated details and dimensions of all the wall signage and menu boards. And then particularly, I'll get some details for the ground sign. Because right now, it's just, like you had mentioned, a foundation at this time.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure
sorry,
we're all talking about the same item.
Yeah, I flipped it. In the staff report, 7 and 8 are separate than the open item kind of list I have afterwards. So sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. At this time, the owner has an LOI with Jimmy John's, so we're kind of feeling like that might move forward pending, what happens here. And they have a few people who are interested in the other side, and we'll make sure to follow those particular uses for tenants.
Good. Okay. I think this is a good time for us to kind of track down the commissioners that we have present this evening and see what sort of questions and comments we have.
Did you want to
Start
go through your
on this side over here.
Oh, yes, I brought a PowerPoint.
Oh.
And you gave that to me,
Did you want to
yes.
track through that?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
why don't we do
it's
that?
kind of what, just a quick summary of what we had already submitted, but let me make sure I'm flipping this right. Okay, so this kind of gives a little bit more detail as far as the area. We took the original plan that was approved back in 2006, and then we took our new proposed site plan and put the extents and limits to kind of help with the side-by-side. So everyone could see, the additional green space that we're picking up on site that will align with the building addition. And these are images that are on the presentation board and that we had previously submitted, kind of our thoughts on, additional landscaping to help buffer electrical panels and different things that you might be able to see from that ring road. This is a plan of the bank as it exists, and then we just kind of clearly defined with, a red bold dash line of what is new and what is existing. So we're basically trying to utilize 2 of the 3 existing drive-through lanes. These are the same images that were on the formal submittal. Similar. We dug up a photo, I guess, from the internet when it didn't look so abandoned. The Bank of America with the signage and all of that, side by side. Same here. Kind of give a feel of what we're trying to do with the building. And thank you.
All right.
Do you have any questions or?
So you want to start down on this thing? Comments, questions?
I would say one of my bigger concerns on this would be in regards to item number 5. I don't know that just adding a second do not enter sign is going to be a big enough deterrent for people to not try to utilize that as a two-way because of the width. I can see, unless I think it needs something more, I don't know if it's pavement markings or that width shrinks, but I think people are going to back out of those spots and just go the easiest way that they can.
You're talking about the 3 spots, 3 parking spaces in the rear?
No, the, on the side of the drive-through, that lane, it looks like it's 26 feet.
Oh, I got you.
And I think that people are going to back out of the spots in front of it, and they're just going to go down as if it's a two-way as opposed to the one-way.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking on that, I had a thought there. I was doing some calculation yesterday, and then I just did it again here now. It seems to me that the concern is, as you just mentioned, that that's a very wide space. It's currently two-way, and we want to make it one-way. Have you thought about the possibility of, and this also speaks to that we're really tight on required parking. Have you thought about putting parallel parking all the way down there, and just instead of spending the money on extra concrete and curb and all that, just simply using the pavement marking to use up half that space or a third of that space with parallel parking? I just measured it out, and it's definitely not to scale. It looks to me like you could fit about 8 spaces down that side, and if they're brightly marked and all that, it would be very clear, with the big arrows, that is a one-way, and that would give you about 8 spaces that would increase our margin on the parking. So that's one thing there, and you could maybe get even 9 or so, but as I just kind of rough sketched it in there, you would want to leave space for that dumpster and equipment coming in there to pull it out. But along those lines, I actually was looking at this, and then I drove out there and looked at it in person. The island that you have at the top, I guess that would be to the west end of the property. It's hard to tell from satellite photo versus the shape you have here. Is the intent to use the existing curb line, or is that completely rebuilt?
It's completely rebuilt.
Okay, so that's a new design here.
We're trying to reduce that, and I believe that was from the initial staff comments, reduce that throat to kind of deter people from going out in that direction.
Yep, I completely agree. The traffic pattern in general here is really awkward, and it's probably for me the biggest concern here.
Okay.
The fact that on the top there, the west end, we do have two-way traffic, but it's the opposite of what drivers are used to. There would be tremendous confusion there. You know what I mean? That you're driving on the wrong side of the road.
Or, sorry, those should actually, could be flipped though. Like you
So
could-
the arrows are wrong?
Yeah, so you can
Okay.
flip the arrows the other way too and still have it be this normal way.
Right, but then you would end up with the drive-through traffic crossing traffic.
But you wouldn't have many cars going out you wouldn't have many vehicles actually going out that way
Yep.
unless they immediately turned in and wanted to go back out. So
So-
that was kind of.
Well, so what I'm looking at is that entrance to the top there goes on the main ring road. And when I look at the number of access points to the ring road, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of curb cuts here. And so what I'm wondering is, a couple of options. The fact that you have that entrance to the side road, accessory road there, or whatever you call it, as well as the one going on, coming in from the ring road, just seems like a lot of ins and outs. Now, I don't know what the engineering and the village requirements are as far as ingress and egress, et cetera, but it just seems like a lot to me. And what I'm wondering is similar to the McDonald's on 171st and by the Jewel on Harlem. We had that discussion. I forget which of you guys were on the commission at the time, but that drive-through, when they added the drive-through there was a lot of discussion about people coming in from two different directions, and they using like a mini island, so to speak. They made it so that you couldn't, for instance, I can see people fighting to get into that drive-through from both of those entrances, right?
Yep.
And they're coming in like this. So the part of what they arrived at with the McDonald's was right here we just have pavement marking, looks like with the stripe. It's not an actual curb cut, right, or curb. If somehow you extended that line around the curve so that to get in the drive-through you had to come in down the accessory road. Again, I'm not a road engineer. I don't know if that would work or not, but it seems to me like that might alleviate some of the fighting for that there. As well, I can see the potential for a lot of conflict with cars in those back three spaces. And I realize it's a fair point that that's more likely to be used by delivery drivers because it's kind of an inconvenient parking space for actual patrons. But again, if you combine the parallel parking down the side, where you could get potentially up to 8 or so, I could foresee just eliminating those spaces entirely. And I think you'd still have a net positive gain on the number of parking spaces.
I think I think our original comment too, because it is awkward and you're kind of trying to make this seem as natural as possible, because if you just put pavement stripings down and it's awkward, people are going to ignore them and go the wrong way anyway. So we're trying to make it as much as possible. We originally wanted to close off one of those entrances, but they're not going to want to close off the one directly on the ring road. And if you close off the other one, it kind of takes away those 3 parking spaces. But if you do gain some elsewhere, you could almost just close that off at that point.
Well-
or make it just an exit. So really the only reason you're only going to have people going out that kind of northwest one off that little side road. So you won't actually have anyone coming in there.
Yeah, I would almost say, I've sketched it out here, but to my mind, whether it was pavement marking, I'm only saying that because I know it's a more cost-effective approach than actually putting in a median type strip. But if you had sort of the pork chop kind of in the middle there,
Yes.
the traffic coming in off the main road would not be able to get to the drive-through, right? It would be funneled one way all the way to the front for dining. And then to get to the drive-through, you'd have to come around that side entrance, which would, for the most part, be exclusively drive-through. Like that's your drive-through entrance.
Yeah, part of the concern was that I think you're going to have most people turn in that front entrance. So if they're trying to get to the drive-through, they've turned in, and then they got to loop all the way back around and come into the drive-through. It seems like you're just going to have most people naturally turn in at that ring road entrance and not that one that's to the northwest, kind of off the side.
Yeah, so
that was
I
part of the
agree.
concern.
There's some brainstorming that needs to be done there. As drawn, I will tell you, I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay.
I don't know that I personally would be able to get on board with where it's at right now. I think that it needs to be worked, because I just see a ton of conflict and a mess, and just it being really inconvenient for all involved there. And then again, those 3 parking spaces in the back, as drawn, it just seems, especially that one all the way to the north, the northernmost. As I was looking at the satellite view, and choking it off, as you said, even more, that car literally has to back into the roadway to get out, and that just seems like a hazard waiting to happen there.
Yes.
So anyway, from my amateur sketching here, those are just some thoughts I have. I just wanted to make clear, I'm not comfortable with what we currently have. Whether anything I've tossed out there has value, that's fine. We'll see what you come up with. I'm just kind of putting that out.
And I respect all of the things that have been stated. We definitely would want to have that curb cut coming in from the north. I drove to the site today, and I got a little bit confused with all of the parking in front of like Sally's and stuff. And I think that would be a great solution, just to kind of put a little bit more green back there. And if we can remove those 3 spots, and, the code allows us to do, 7 or 8 parallel parking spaces, that would be great. As far as Jimmy John's, I know we have cold weather right now, but a lot of their delivery drivers are on bikes too. So that kind of helps with the whole.
Probably not out here, but
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're going to ride bikes though in the summer. Some of those.
it'd be a far ride to the nearest house.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's a really good point. I don't know where I could see them delivering to employees who are working at the stores, but driving or riding a bike
Yeah.
outside
Farther.
the marketplace.
Yeah, because there's those Jimmy John's down the street from here, and they don't use bikes, and they have closer homes. So the-
Because once you get off the ring road, those roads are 45 or 50 mile an hour speed limits,
Yeah.
and it's a 4-lane road on 191st Street. There's not really a bike path
Yeah.
cut there,
I-
or even a sidewalk that they could ride a bike on.
Well-
if we could close that all off, though,
Okay.
that'd almost kind of be the best solution, I think. In our fire trucks basically just need a full circulation pattern around the building. We kind of say they can't reverse, even though they can. So that should still
We just
work.
need to buy smaller fire trucks.
But that would, obviously there's a cost associated with that, so you may need to run that past the owner. And then maybe you could pick up the parallel.
Okay.
Pick those parking spaces back up in parallel. I don't love parallel spaces in shopping centers like this, but it'll kind of be an overflow type situation, or maybe delivery driver situation.
Well, and I could put some actually up front. I didn't want to remove any of the approved parking or approved landscaping from the 2006 plan. I felt coming here asking for approval, I was adding to and making it better and not necessarily taking anything away. But perhaps if I take down the one tree and replant it somewhere else, and still get the same numbers, that might work.
You mean the one in that island? To the
Correct.
west there?
Mhm.
But is it because of visual obstruction there? Or?
No,
Well, I think
just
you're
for
saying
more parking.
Add-in parking there, as long as there's
Oh, I
still
see.
an end island there.
Okay.
Like in the curbing, that could work, because that's a pretty wide island right there, and we'd still want a walkway connection down.
Okay.
But if you can finish that kind of like it does on the other side, it would just be too kind of.
And now I'm picking up more green ratio towards the back if I were to solve it
Yeah, that
accordingly.
Be a park out there.
Mhm. It will be a park.
And put some good Jimmy John's right there.
Okay, so I apologize. I hopped in there and
No.
jumped in on your item. Did you have some other points there that you wanted to make?
No, that was mine.
You're good? Okay. Commissioner Main?
No, I think, we covered it, when I saw the site plan too, the whole awkwardness, wide lane, I could see myself going the opposite way, and, I think at the top, that first curb cut, I know what you got drawn was to shrink the throat, but I think more likely it's kind of like move that entrance over to the north to create the natural flow going into the drive-through, or they could funnel around to park in front to dine in.
So is that island going to be completely rebuilt or just reshaped?
Reshaped was the goal. We were just going to add to. And one of the suggestions to the northwest, where the sidewalk stops right behind Taco Bell property line, and then as soon as it moves over to ours, it just wasn't built. Maybe if we could change that throat so it's a little bit more of a straight-on shot. I don't know how that'll affect site plan approvals or, for the next meeting. But we can look into that and see how that'll all, because we do have Kimley Horn on reserve, so we can definitely address that with them and see if they have concerns.
Well, I do agree with the point about even though the existing sidewalk kind of dies there, and if it were extended through this property, it would then just die a little further. But I'm a big advocate for we need to take every incremental bite off of the complete sidewalks that we can. So I can't tell from this drawing if it's drawn in there.
I do have that one.
It looks like it's in that very corner there.
I do have the one that's the side-by-side.
But it doesn't go through that island, right?
Correct. Yeah, so it kind of ends there on the south.
So there's no
west
crossing.
side. Yeah, but it doesn't actually move all the way across the site.
Okay.
And then to the north of this is that TJ Maxx, Sally Shopping Center. And there's, I wanted to continue the sidewalk, and there's almost no space over there. You'd have to redo most of the parking lot to even get it to kind of continue. But that was our original thought too, was could you get some kind of sidewalk across kind of where that sign, just to the north of that sign. Because actually this curb is kind of set back a little bit, and it's kind of it doesn't actually continue that ring road drive really smoothly. It's set back a couple extra feet.
Yeah, to me, that's an excellent point too. That almost encourages, it's just too much pavement, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it encourages drivers to cut the corners and, drive outside the lanes. And it almost looks like the intent for the monument sign is to be like right where a sidewalk would be.
Yes, that's where the existing monument sign was, or the former. We plan on putting it on the same foundation.
Same.
Yeah, and I'll be more clear with the drawings I bring to the next meeting.
So is, Dan, where the zoning setback line is there,
Yeah.
is that potentially why they stopped the curb there?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's if this had come in before, we would have caught that. But I wouldn't get why, because the rest of the shopping center is built into that zoning setback line that functions as part of the drive aisle. So it seems like it was almost a mistake or something, where really that should have bumped out and made that bumped out to where the rest of kind of that curb line is along that ring road.
Yeah, and again,
I don't
that's
know
why.
if I don't know if a sidewalk, and even if we did that, I don't know if a sidewalk would fit in there or not. But
Well,
we'd have to
looks like it to me. Again, just eyeballing the one to the south of it, right?
Mhm.
And again, that's why I kept going back. I understand cost constraints, but if you guys are redoing the perimeter of that beam
Curb.
anyway, I think it's worth exploring to see if they could keep the monument sign where it's at, but if the perimeter of that island could go all the way out to align with the others for consistency. It looks to me anyway like you could just go right along that setback line with your sidewalk. It looks like it lines up perfectly, like that's how it's supposed to be. But again, that's something to consider when you guys do the actual measuring and engineering and revisit and all that. If that's a practical possibility, I would like to see that. If it's not, and there's practical limitations about why you can't do it, we'll hear that.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Augustinian?
Well, first of all, I think that the idea that we want to repurpose buildings, I think, is an excellent plan.
Thank you.
Considering that building's been sitting there vacant for 3+ years.
Yeah.
Um,
2015.
I would just go along with the comments on the traffic flow. That is definitely a disaster waiting to happen, because I can see people not taking the circular route, but wanting to go, out through the indoor or in through the outdoor. And especially if you get a winter and you get a few snow piles from snow removal in the lots that take up a few spaces, and you're looking at a definite disaster there potentially. So with the modifications I think that are suggested, I would definitely go along with those recommendations. Other than that, don't see anything other than some of the open items that we've discussed earlier.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So on that point, on the open items, as I'm looking through a lot of these, I think we discussed the more significant ones that any of the commissioners had concerns about or comments about. I do have some notes from Commissioner Gray, who couldn't make it this evening, but he did submit some comments, and I won't read through them because pretty much covered them all through the discussion here. but he was effectively in agreement with what was in there. There was a few points that he emphasized, et cetera. There was one point about having a condition where if there was a change of tenant change of use, closing off the drive-through, right?
It'd be removing it,
Yeah,
essentially.
so that's what I wanted to gain some clarity on. If we, in theory, I get that because we don't want to go through another a situation where we have a dedicated purpose that can't be repurposed, right? I just want to understand the burden that we would be placing on the owner when we say remove. What do we mean by remove? Are we talking about strip up the pavement? Talking about
That would kind of be, it'd be up to them at the time, but it'd be taking off the overhang in the wall, all the equipment. Probably you'd do some kind of landscaping and curbing and make it kind of naturally fit into the rest of the site. We'd have to look at, we'd kind of want them to propose something, and that's where we go through a site plan process that met all the requirements, and it looked great. We can maybe approve that administratively. If we had some kind of issues with it or it didn't meet the codes, it'd be before you guys.
I would just want to make sure we're not placing an unreasonable burden as a restriction there, right?
I don't think it'd be anything I mean, it would cost money, obviously, but then it'd probably be because they have a tenant in there.
Yeah.
So that it would be, there'd be a little bit of a cost burden. Likely, they'll probably find someone else to reuse the drive-through because there's a value to those.
Yeah.
But there would be some cost, but I think taking down that portion of the building would be the most expensive part, and then they could just do some kind of landscaping or something along the side.
Yeah, that's the part that seems odd to me. Deconstructing it. I mean, I could almost see, requiring them to, like put up a little fence so that it becomes a courtyard or landscaping or something.
Could they expand the space again?
Yeah,
that'd be another
That would be
option.
what I would want to do. I mean, I was just in the building today, and the way it's welded together, you can't just sever it. It wouldn't be a real easy
Yeah.
solution.
So conceptually, I agree with having some sort of condition to restore and not leave an eyesore type thing. I would just be concerned about the overreach of us having a restriction that would be a substantial cost, or even potentially not practical, from a...
Sure, I can kind of loosen that wording up a little bit. That'll give them allow them to present a solution to not have an abandoned drive-through, basically, at that point. Whatever they want to do, it'll probably come through a site plan process, and we can address it through that.
Yeah, I mean, I would be comfortable with something, done through landscaping or, something of that nature. But again, however we craft that language, don't want to back anybody into a corner.
And we could even do a tenant if it isn't a drive-through, like a dry cleaner or something that would have the window. I mean, you could probably get a food-based tenant that doesn't have a drive-through, and it could be a cool patio with some lights or something.
That's...
There's
You could, there's ways
If you put
of
up a
cool
little
adaptive
fence,
reuse.
that would be a nice little courtyard kind of thing.
So I can change the wording on that. The intent's just, I think we don't want to see it, if they don't use it, just this another awkward situation.
Yep.
So
I think we're all on the same page. I think we can meet the spirit of the objective you're saying there without being, and plus, we want to be a little bit positive. We're not gonna have to cross that bridge.
Jimmy John's will be there forever.
Yes.
So, with respect to the open items, I think we covered them, right? Do you have enough information to at least kind of get
Yes,
going?
I think we have some idea, and the traffic flow thing was big. We're trying to make it work with signs, because those at least are a little better than striping. I think we have some ideas, and maybe
Yeah.
we'll reconvene and talk about, try and find a better solution than this. From the sidewalk, the drive-through removal condition, possible parallel parking striping. So I think we have some good feedback there.
Okay, that sounds good. And I would just say, for the record, I have eaten at Jimmy John's quite a few times, and I enjoy them, but I don't believe that any part of that will impair my ability to make a
Fair and impartial decision, yes.
Yes, I think I can still act with fairness and impartiality with respect to Jimmy John's. Okay. Thank you very much. And you know what they mentioned, you have something here, which I just knocked down. Was that something we needed to look at, or is that just a larger view of what was in the report?
Yeah, it's a larger view of some of these pictures. So
All right.
it almost came in handy when we didn't have the PowerPoint.
Well, thank you, everyone.
I didn't want to
And
just
I'll
let that.
follow up with you tomorrow.
Go here.
We can kind of go over everything and make sure we're on track for that December 20th.
Oh, that was.
All right, again, because we are not technically in a public meeting, there will not be public comment. And I think we would likely dispense with good of the order and some of the other things. And because we are not in a public meeting and didn't technically open it, there's no need to adjourn it for this evening. But we're not technically going to have good of the order and all that, but did you have any comments or anything
I
you wanted
guess
to
I
add
can
there,
just
Dan?
give some updates if you want. So the plaza's been moving forward. I know they met. They meet next week on the final budgeting for that. Staff's also visited a few other kind of similar plazas, like what they're trying to do with that have ice ribbons and events. I think specifically Rosemont was one that they were looking at. They have a pretty active plaza. There's also streetscapes planned for the downtown. Those discussions have continued, and we have a plan going in place there to just kind of have a uniform downtown streetscape, since it's changed so many times over the years. And we have projects coming forward. We want to have a solid plan, so that's still moving forward with the contractor that we have. Bremen, that we talked a little bit about that. That'll be continued to the January meeting. Again, they got some info on their incentives from the board and stuff, so it still looks like they want to go through with approval for the building though. But the incentive stuff isn't quite clear for them yet. And then we're going to have Airbnb stuff coming forward soon, or the short-term rentals in general, not just Airbnb, but just we've been researching regulations and trying to get something that fits what Tinley could handle. There's always that balance of it's good in some cases, but you don't want new neighbors every day. So,
And I believe that matter is going to be discussed at a committee meeting at some point?
Yeah, so there'll be kind of two parts to it. There'll be a licensing part, so the board will discuss that part kind of at a committee, but there's also likely to be attached zoning changes, creating kind of a use group for that, so you guys will be involved in that side of it. And then lastly is just, we're working on the small cell stuff, so we got some clarification. The FCC had, the state passed a law, and then the FCC put in extra rules. So I think we're maybe at a stopping point with the additional regulations, so I think we're gonna get design requirements for small cells back in front of you guys. Just because we have some interest in them going up, but we wanna make sure they're done right. That'll be a zoning code text amendment change.
Okay,
So that stuff will all be coming forward soon.
good. So I brought this up, it's been a while since we had a meeting, I think I brought this up either the last meeting or the one before, about the mental health center RFQ process. I was looking for some clarity as to what the Plan Commission's role is going to be in that. I know there are some master plans that have been proposed, but nothing has come before the Plan Commission. And, so I would be looking for some information about how the process is intended or viewed that it's going to move forward here. I, for one, would like to start before a decision is made and it gets back flushed through the Plan Commission for essentially recommendation. I'd hate for it to be a done deal before it ever gets to us.
Sure.
So perhaps for our December meeting, if we could get some additional insight as to how that process is being visualized, particularly with respect to us as an advisory commission to the board.
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of it's still in the board's hands and a lot of it's still in the state hands because we don't know if we're buying it. We don't know if it's going to be private development and then zoning.
Yeah,
so there's still a lot of question marks and we're not getting a lot of good answers.
Those parts of it are, at least from my perspective, outside the purview of the Plan Commission.
Yeah.
When it comes to the master plan itself, it seems like it's right up where our role is. So hopefully, as that moves forward, the Plan Commission will be more engaged in that so that we can actually
Sure, I'll talk to the director.
take on that advisory role we're supposed to have.
Yeah, I know the board kind of directed some of the firms to kind of come up with those as an initial step. So I'll talk to the director and just see how we can get you involved or when and get you some information on that.
I just want,
Because at this point,
I want to
everything
make
is-
sure we get engaged when we're supposed to.
Yeah,
I don't really have the clarity on
everything's
that
pretty much
point.
been put on pause now until we get an answer. So that we've kind of got some of those initial concepts that were submitted, but
Mhm.
everything's just stopped at this point, as far as I know. So until the state gives an answer or an appraisal on the property. So,
All right.
But I'll get you an answer. Try and get you some more clarification about when you guys will come in or when you guys will see something that you can give some comments on.
Well, the
Yeah.
village has to acquire the property first. And then it has to be determined that the environmental things have to be squared away before you can put any kind of development, because EPA and stuff may not give permits to put anything there until it's brought to a livable condition.
Yeah, again, outside my technical expertise, but my understanding is because the property is within the village's in corporate limits, and certainly within our planning area, the village, whether or not it owns it, can create a master plan. right?
Yeah.
And zone
And just
it.
have it on hold until such time as, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, all those things are, outside of us. I just want to make sure that if our role is to be advisory, then we become engaged at the appropriate time. So, all right, that's all I have. If there's nothing further, then I believe we can simply adjourn tonight's meeting. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much for your time.